What's up, guys? Thank you for joining me today on Instinctive Addiction Archery. I'm Jeff Phillips. Okay, I'm gonna try to help you today with something that has been like so much requested. Okay, so many questions have come in pertaining to this, and I really want to try to help some of you guys figure out, okay, let's say you just ordered you a brand new bow. You just got it in. Okay, now you got to get it set up. Okay, I'm going to help you from ground zero with that. Ground zero with the new bow, okay? It's very simple, and please remember that no two bows are alike. In other words, you may get a hold to one that is going to be finicky to get a bare shaft, okay? Don't drive yourself crazy over that. Get it decent and shoot it, okay? You will figure out what to do with it. Playing with arrows, playing with point weights, all these things, because everything does matter. It really does. But if you're chasing perfection, it's going to take a little time, guys. It's going to take a little time. But the object is to get a bow shooting as quiet as it can, as efficient as it can, and as accurate as it can. Putting arrows down range where you want them to go. Because it's hard for you to work on form and nail your form down if your bow is not ready to begin with. In other words, you got to have your bow ready to rock before you worry about your shooting technique. Okay, so what I'm going to do with you guys, I'm going to show you a basic quick setup on a couple of different bows on what you need to start with from ground zero. Here we go, guys. All right, I'll take this ILF bow, for instance. Okay, take this ILF rig, which is a 62-inch bow, okay? A 62-inch recurve. General settings on this, first you have to figure out, are you going to shoot 3-under or are you going to shoot split finger? Which one do you prefer to do? Because that's going to determine where you set your knocks at, okay? So, me, I'm shooting 3 fingers under. 3-under, okay? So, that tells me that it's going to be a little bit different than when I shot split, because I have done both and there is a slight different setting initially for both kinds. All right, so let's just say I'm going to start with split finger. If you get a bow and you only feel comfortable shooting split finger, that's 2 below the arrow, 1 above the arrow. That is called split. Okay, if that's what you want to do, your initial knock height, once you string your bow up, and you want to start out, because even the finest quality strings in the world, like these triple T strings, they have just a tiny bit of settle, just a tiny bit. But a lesser quality string is really going to continue to creep and creep and creep. And what I mean by creep is it's going to stretch. Okay, it's going to stretch. And your brace height, which is your distance between the throat of the grip and the string, is going to shrink. So as that does, your knock naturally moves upward, giving your angle, your arrow an angle. Okay, so it throws everything off. So you need to keep a check on your brace height. And what I'm going to start with, guys, is that very first thing. When you string your bow up, put a couple of additional twists and start a little bit tall on your brace height. It means if your bow is recommended between, say, a 7.5 and an 8-inch brace height, which is what most bows are. What you want to do, guys, is you want to first, well, let's do this first. Brace height. Get you a T-square, a cheap T-square. That's the first thing you're going to need. Put the T-square in here where your grip, the furthest part end of your grip. And you will see a measurement. If you will notice that measurement, guys, and I'll show you. This bow is dead on 8-inch brace height. Why? Because it's a 62-inch bow. If this bow were shorter, I would run a little bit less. That's right, I would. Longer bows like around an 8-inch brace height. That's where they're the quietest, the smoothest, they shoot the best, and that's generally what you run. Now, I have 56 and 58-inch bows. I run those bows between 7.5 and maybe 7 3/4. Okay, depending on exactly what arrow I'm shooting and how it likes to tune best. But in general, call it an 8-inch brace height on a 62-inch bow. That's about where you want to start, okay? So that's what's called brace height, is this distance between the string and the riser. That's your brace. So you want to set it a little tall by putting a couple of extra twists on the lower end of the string. Always adjust on the bottom end of the string, the bottom loop. That's the one you want to do your adjustments, not the top, okay? So twist it up to say 8 1/4. Shoot the bow a couple of dozen times. You will notice very quickly when you measure, it's moved in. That's right, because that string is settling. So you want to twist it up to where that string will settle where you want it to stay. Okay, no different than a compound. That's why compounds have to be retuned after a new string breaks in. That's why, because the cams rotate in. The bow's all of a sudden out of time. It's out of tune. Has to be redone. Unless you have a string that just will not stretch. And there are materials that won't. But most traditional bows, shooting D97 Fast Flight, B55 Dacron, things of that nature, they're going to stretch a little bit. Okay? So, set it in a little tall. Let it creep in. Now, nock height. Once you have your brace height about where you want it, the good old T-square is your best friend. It really is, guys. You gotta have your good T-square. And all you do is you put it on the string and you just put it down till it touches. Just where it touches here, okay? It's just touching the bottom of the wrist. Right there where that arrow is going to sit. Then you have marks on this thing. And this being 0, your bottom line being 0, guys. Okay, and the next line is a 1/2 inch. Okay, so you have these measurements in between here. That's just where these things tend to run. Okay, so you can look at the measurements on these things, and you've got an 1/8, 1/4, 3/8, a 1/2, 5/8. That's actually what that is. That's 5/8. Okay, so I have a mark on mine because I like shooting this particular bow on 5/8 of an inch nock set. That's what it likes the best. It likes 5/8 at my draw. Now remember this, guys. Very important. The longer your draw cycle is, the longer your draw length is, generally the higher nock set you're gonna want to shoot for your arrows to tune. That's right. Now, I'll give you an example of this. You say, well, why? How does that make any difference? A guy with a 27-inch draw, his nock is not going to tune where a guy with a 29 is going to tune. It's not. In other words, if I set my bow on, say, 1/2 inch or 5/8 to the top nock, to the bottom of the top nock here, where my arrow would touch, and a guy with a 29-inch draw grabs my bow, and my arrow's being bare shaft tuned perfect. If he gets my bow and he draws it further than I do, all of a sudden that arrow, hang on, that arrow is now on a plane. In other words, you can see what this looks like already. Just running a 5/8 nock height. I'm sorry, guys. Let me show you what I mean. Trying to turn this around where you can see it. Okay. Holding the bow perfectly vertical. Notice the slope that arrow's in. I keep knocking it off there. It's not perfectly level. No, it's not. But as the bow is drawn, the arrow will level off. Okay? So a guy with a longer draw length, he's going to need a slightly higher nock set than a guy like me would with a 27-inch draw, so that arrow will level on off for him correctly. In other words, it'll level too much. It'll start to go down at his draw, and it will cause the arrow to ramp off the shelf and give you a tail high tendency on the arrow. In other words, the arrow is going to leave the bow tail low. It is going to hit the shelf, and it is going to ramp, and it's going to leave the bow flying tail high. That's what happens. So generally, when you have a tail high reading, when you watch your arrow and you see it kicking tail high, you need to go up with your nock. It means that it's ramping off the shelf, guys. That's what's happening. Okay, so generally, if you are around a 27 to 28 inch draw, you're going to want to set your nock, whether you run doubles, like come on these triple T strings, or whether you just run one brass nock, whichever you do, your top nock will need to be around 5/8 of an inch above center. No lower than a half, and generally no higher than 3/4. Okay, it's going to be in that range, guys, to tune pretty much any arrow. And all arrows are not the same. Multiple tuning issues going on here. I get dozens and dozens and dozens of bear shaft questions every week. And it's always the same thing. I can't get my arrows to bear shaft tune. One does this, one does that. Well, guys, not all arrows are the same, okay? They're not, okay? It's just the nature of some arrows. Some you get are just very finicky, okay? So you can't always base everything on what's happening with the arrows that you've got if you've got arrows that just don't like your bow, or your bow don't like those arrows. It's a fact. So generally gold tips, they're going to be super easy. They're going to, in general, they're going to. And there's lots of other ones that will as well, but they're just easy. Okay, they bear shaft tune very easy, no matter which ones it is. Now, keeping in mind your brace height on an initial setup on a bow. If it's an ILF rig like this one, if that's what you get, then the first thing that you're going to want to do is you're going to want to silence this bow. How do you silence a bow? It's very simple, guys. Number one, limbs make contact right here with the limb bolt. They do. These limbs, when you snap them on before you string it, you notice they rock back and forth. They just teeter. And as you shoot, they have vibration, where that limb is vibrating against the head of that limb bolt. You've got to pad that. You got to pad it with some Velcro. And sometimes you have to actually pad the bottom of the limb, or the top of the ILF pad down in there, where this part makes contact. And what you can do, snap your limbs on, shoot them a few times, pull them off, and you'll see the Mars. Really bad Mars. You'll see it on every bow. I don't care what kind it is, every riser under the sun, every combination, it doesn't matter. You're going to see Mars where it is contacting. So you can pad that, shut the bows right up. A quality string also makes them extremely quiet, like these triple T's. These strings shut a bow up. They're so much quieter than the cheap strings. They just are. I don't even run limb backing on here, okay? I don't have no limb backing. If you want to put limb backing, like I run on my hunting bows and some of the other ones, yes, Velcro. You don't want to completely fill up the groove, because that groove's there for a reason on a recurve. It's there to keep that string in line, okay? So you don't want to fill that up. But putting something that will absorb some of that, or putting yarn around the string there, it'll shut them up. It will, because you're getting a little bit of slap against a recurve limb. Now, a longbow, no, you don't have that problem. Longbows are super easy. But we're talking recurves here, all right? So, silence it up, get your brace height set, get your initial nock set around that 5/8. And if you're shooting split finger, you're going to be a little bit less. Now, I don't want to confuse you on this. If you want to write this down, write it down. Split finger, 1/2 inch. 3 under, 5/8. Generally. In other words, if you're shooting 3 fingers under, Apache, you're going to want to shoot a slightly higher nock set. It's just the way it works. That's how they shoot the best. You're going to shoot a little bit higher nock height. I've seen guys shooting 3 under that shoot 3/4 inch nock height for their bow to tune. Whatever it takes. I mean, if that's what it takes for your arrows to tune, then so be it. That's what your bow likes. Now, on ILF rigs like this, and guys, if you say, well, what is ILF? International Limb Fitment. In other words, it is a connection system. If a riser is ILF, then it will take any ILF limb in the world, and every company makes them, all millions of different ones, anything you could think of. And that's what's cool about them, because you can buy limbs endless and throw them on your riser and you got a new bow all of a sudden. Okay, but they just snap right in. They snap in, they snap out. That's what I mean. Now, there are adjustments on ILF bows that need to be made. Initially, yes, they do. And it's called your limb adjustment. Getting the limb perfectly vertical, perfectly straight, where your string groove is riding perfect, where your string is riding perfect in that groove. In other words, that limb's not offset any kind of way. So how do you do that? Well, every one of them have little set screws here and here, both limbs. They got little set screws. What I do is I take the Allen key and I loosen them up. I back them out. I take the bow and I simply do this a couple of times. Look at them, make sure that they are just laser straight, and I tweak them back. I tighten them, snug them both back up equally. Then I know my bow's good to go. Sometimes you can visually look down the bow. You can actually look down it sometimes and see if the limb is straight. But you can adjust them, and that's what's good, because if you got a limb that's crooked, and I don't mean warped, I mean just crooked, just not straight on the bow, it's not going to tune. The bow's not going to shoot a bare shaft like it should. So you got to make sure that these are straight, and don't trust the factory. Please don't trust the factory, and I don't care what brand it is. Very few are going to be set from the factory where they are 100% perfect and ready to go. I promise you that. Most likely not. So anyway, that's an ILF bow setup. Super easy, guys. Well, let's look at a different type. I'll grab a different one. Let's just say here, I have got right here a custom bow, okay? This is actually one that we built. This is a little 56-inch carbon trace, okay? This is a carbon trace, belongs to a friend of mine. And beautiful little bow, 48-pound, 56-inch double carbon little bow. So this little bow runs a 13-inch riser. It's short in nature. It's a 56-inch bow, guys, okay? 56 inches. So what do you do on a short bow? What really tunes good on a short bow? And to begin with, how do you select an arrow for a bow like this? Well, the formula is pretty simple, guys. It really is. Mid to upper 40s, 28-inch draw or less, a 500 is generally going to be the arrow to start with. Doesn't mean that if you don't want to shoot extreme point weight that you can't go up to a 400, shoot one a little longer or whatever. But I'll guarantee you don't need a 600 out of it. A 600 will never spine. It will always be too weak. Out of a bow 45 pounds and up, actually anything much more than 43 or 4, that's borderline in a 600. Okay, but a good old 500 is your middle of the road for that kind of weight. And you can even shoot a 40-pound bow, drawing 28, 29 inches, shooting a 30, 31 inch, even a 29-inch 500 with 180, 200 grains, whatever, on the front. And this thing's going to tune. It will. A 500 is versatile because you can play with point weight so much on them. Okay, but initially setting up a short recurve. Where do I set these up? And bear in mind, every bow here has been bare shaft tuned to perfection, to shooting it in a target, bare shafting, figuring out what arrow it likes at anywhere from 10 to 30 yards. I mean, they have over and over to really get an accurate reading. Like this particular bow, this bow likes a 500 with about 200 grains on it. I mean, it's just a rocket. It shoots them so incredibly well. It does. it will shoot a 400 amazing in the right arrow. And you say, well, what do you mean in the right arrow? Oh, I mean in the right arrow. Because not all arrows are the same. In other words, I'll show you the match arrow and then I'll tell you the setup for this thing. Here it is, guys. A Black Eagle Instinct 400. Rampage. Black Eagle Rampage. 400 spine, 100 grain inserts, 150 grain tips. This thing is an absolute bullet. It shoots amazing out of this bow, okay? So, slim diameter arrows tend weak. I've shared that in so many videos, I've lost count, guys. And don't ever forget it. If you're going to go with a 204 inside diameter arrow, generally go up one spine if you're going to put hunting weight on the front of it, because they tend weak. Yes, they do. They're not like standard arrows. Okay, starting with brace height. This bow, being a 56-inch bow, there she is, 7.5-inch brace height. See? 7.5. Hope you guys can see it. 7.5 inches, not 8. Shorter bows shoot shorter brace height because it does not have as long of a wingspan. It does not need that much brace height, okay? 7.5 would be a little bit low. A little low on a longer recurve like this 62-inch ILF bow. It would be. Now, this bow is set up to shoot 3 under. Where's it at? Voila. 5/8 of an inch. There it is. That's 3/4. 5/8. This bow is shooting a 5/8 inch Nock set with a 7.5-inch brace height. And the bow is literally totally silent. It is one of the quietest bows I've ever seen in my life. Beyond quiet, okay? And very, very hard shooting bow, but it has no hand shock and no noise. Why? Because it's at that sweet spot where it likes. And you'll notice, guys, when you start shooting too light of an arrow, your bow will tell you. You'll feel vibration in the bow. You'll hear little twingy sounds in the limbs that you normally don't have. That's telling you that you're starving the bow. It's wasted energy. You're not getting all that the bow's intended to do, and you might damage it. Okay, so don't starve your bow with arrow mass weight. Okay, no matter how you build your arrows, make sure they're heavy enough to absorb that bow's energy. So this bow, total weight, a 48 at 28. This bow likes a 550 grain arrow. That's its favorite. It'll shoot a 500, really not that much noticeable at all, but at my draw, I find it to be the sweetest with about a 550 grain arrow, and that's what it loves, okay? ILF bows, same way. I can shoot this top archery bow here, and I can shoot a 325 grain arrow out of it. And yes, it's fast, but I'm hearing it. I'm hearing a little noise, and I can feel just a little bit in it because it's wasting energy. All of it's not going into the air because that 325 grain arrow cannot absorb it all. It can't. So, as you see, you have to match your bow with the correct arrows of what it likes the best. And to give you recommendations on that, I always keep a simple formula. I do. If a guy calls me or messages me and says, okay, Jeff, I just bought a 45-pound, whatever, a 62-inch bow from Three Rivers or whatever, and I need to get my arrows. What arrows do I need to order? Or I'm going to order a bow or whatnot. What do I need? Well, first of all, what are you going to do? Are you just going to target shoot, or are you getting it to hunt with? Most guys are going to do both, okay? The simple formula for doing that is to get an arrow that is going to be stiff enough that you can put some point weight on it for hunting when you get ready to, and get out there and shoot with that additional point weight, okay? 3D, yeah, you can get by with a lot lighter setups, lightweight bows, and that's what a lot of guys do anyway. They'll shoot 35 to 40 pound bows and 310 grain arrows. Great, that's a 3D setup. Most people are doing that. They love it, okay? But hunting bows are a completely different world. So if you want the versatile setup, I recommend to kind of keep this in mind. If you're 40 pounds, if you're drawing 45 pounds or more, go with a 500, okay? If you're over 47, 8 pounds, you're probably gonna need a 400. And there again, this is recurves. Longbows are different. Longbows typically do not have the energy that a recurve limb does. Therefore, they will shoot weaker spined arrows in general, okay? Secondly, most longbows are not cut that deep in the shelf. They may be cut to center or barely past, if any. Therefore, they're gonna require a little bit weaker spined arrow. In other words, that arrow is going to need to be able to get around that shelf. Paradox. When you shoot it, it's got to bend around that shelf and come off, okay? So don't go too heavy on your spine with a longbow, for sure. And I'm gonna show you one more, guys, a 58. I'll show you my 58, which is my hunting bow. And it is a 51 pound at 28. I draw 48 pounds, and I'm still shooting 500s out of this bow. It will shoot 400s. Yes, it will. It will shoot a 400 cut about 28 and a half inches with 300 grains on the front. Absolutely amazing. But I prefer the 500s with about 250, okay? That's the sweet spot for this bow, and these things are weighing about 530 grains, and they shoot amazing out of this bow, okay? So that's what I'm able to do here. Let me grab it and show you guys. It is an awesome, awesome setup. But a 58, this is my hunting bow here. This is the bow I've actually taken all my deer with this year. It's been good. But my setup on a 58-inch bow, my brace height, dead on 7.5, guys. Just like that other one. 7.5-inch brace height on it. And I am running, there it is, 5/8 of an inch above center. 5/8 above center. So there you have it. That's your typical setup. 7.5-inch brace height, 5/8 nock height. If you have a longer bow, like a 62 or a 64 or whatever, you're probably going to need an 8-inch brace height. Remember, the brace height is the distance between the string and the grip, okay? The deepest part of the throat of the grip. So that's your initial setup, guys. And I hope this has answered some of your questions as far as basic setup and arrow selection. You can go by arrow charts to an extent, but remember, and Three Rivers charts are a lot more accurate than some people's are. Okay, in other words, don't just get online and go like to an Easton chart or something like that. No. Because they're not factoring in running 50 or 100 grain weighted inserts and 150 to 200 grain broadheads and all this stuff. No, it's not. Just remember, if you're shooting a lightweight bow, shoot a 600. If you're shooting a hunting weight bow, shoot a 500. And if you're man enough to shoot up in the 50s, go with a 400. Maybe even a 340 if you're shooting enough weight and your draw is long enough. Every factor is different. But in general, bows in the 40s like a 500. That way you can start long, you can trim it down as you go, doing your bear shaft, and get you a test kit. You know, Three Rivers has the test kits there where you can get like 3 arrows and play with them off 3 different spines, different point weights, all that stuff. Serious Archery has them. Serious Archery has a really good setup, but they're more geared to the compound guy, and they're expensive. Three Rivers offers these combinations in a multitude of arrows. I mean, if you like gold tips, hey, no problem. And if you want to buy Warriors, let's just say if you're wanting to shoot the gold tip Warriors like these, call them and say, hey man, I need a couple of different shafts. Just send me some shafts, some inserts, some tips, and all that I can cut and play with, and figure out what my bow likes. Then I'll order some, pre-fletched, ready to go. That's what I would do, guys. That's a really, really, really good option. So thank you for joining me on Instinctive Addiction Archery. I'm Jeff Phillips. Love you guys so much, and hopefully this will help you a little bit. I know you're excited when you get that new bow, but it can be frustrating at the same time. But if you have questions, if you're a guy that's got a bow, if you're struggling and you can't figure it out, drop me a comment, guys. Drop it in the comment box. Ask me the question. I promise I'll get to you. It may take me just a little bit, but I'll get to you. And sometimes I'm quick on them. It depends on how busy I am. But I will do my best. If you give me your specs of what your bow is, what your draw length is, and remember, you got to know exactly what you're drawing. And I'll tell you guys, and we'll close up with this one. 9 out of 10 guys think they have a longer draw length than they do. They do. They think they do. So the best thing you can do is figure it out if you already have a bow. If you have a bow and you're trying to figure out what you need to go with, take and measure from the throat of that nock. From the throat of that nock right there. Measure out on that shaft 28 inches or whatever. If you just want to draw it to your hunting draw, like you target shoot. I mean, come into your anchor, don't overdraw it. Shoot a natural posed shot. Well, don't shoot it, draw it. Draw the arrow back. Have somebody mark it right against your riser. And I mean, literally, when you draw your bow back in your position, wherever it meets, have somebody mark it. Have them mark it with a Sharpie or anything right there. Then you lay that thing down and you measure it, and it will tell you what your draw length is. Then you can say, hey, I'm really actually only 26 and a half. That's perfectly normal. I know lots of guys that are drawing 24 and a half, 25 inches that thought they were 28. Seriously, guys. But on a compound, if you've been shooting a compound bow and your mods are 28-inch mods, 28 and a half, you're probably a 27 on a trad bow. Count on being at least about an inch shorter. It's just the way it is. So you can say, all right, I have this draw, and my bow is say a 50 at 28. I'm only drawing 29. For every inch that you are short of that, subtract about 3 pounds. Recurve limbs gain or lose about 3 pounds per inch of draw. That's normal, 2.5 to 3 pounds. So, with that being said, you can say, all right, now I know I'm pulling 47 pounds. Well, that tells you a whole lot. That way you can get into that spine selection, getting the right arrow spine to start your arrow build with. That's where you got to start it, guys. So thank you for joining me today on Instinctive Addiction Archery. Love you guys so much. Pray that everything we say will help you in a great way and give honor and glory to the good Lord above that gives us all things to enjoy, including archery. We love you so much, guys. If you hadn't subscribed, hit that button. If you like the videos, make sure you hit like. Just makes YouTube share the videos among other places that they normally wouldn't. And we might gain a few new archers along the way. Maybe bring some guys over, spark their interest, and hopefully this has helped you. Thank you, guys, and God bless.